I'm going to be brief in describing a project that we did here at the ICT. Similarly to the project you heard of at the beginning, the Red Alert project. And it's always daunting to follow speakers such as the ones we've heard this morning, who really talk about the more practical aspects of counterterrorism and give a really close insider's view into the goings-on and the developments in both terrorist activity and counter-terrorist activity, and then to step back, which we're about to do here with our clicker, to the legal and the regulatory aspects of the counterterrorism struggle. Now, to immediately attempt to save most of the audience from absolutely closing their eyes and falling asleep, I really want to stress that the importance, my understanding of the importance of the legal and regulatory pieces. Hold on. I told you, they do the practical stuff, I just do the regulatory and legal stuff. So why is it important, and why are we even discussing the legal piece and the regulatory piece? So the best way for me to kind of introduce the topic in taking a step back is to frame the legal and the regulatory piece of the counterterrorism struggle as the inevitable infrastructure of enforcement. We can have norms that we understand. We can have the excellent understandings that we've heard already of how terrorism works, how counterterrorism works, the narratives and those issues. If we don't have an enforcement framework, we can't move ahead. So my hope for in the next few minutes is to finish up with at least some, for those of you who aren't in the legal sector and don't do legal work, my hope is to at least interest you in this underpinnings of how we do counterterrorism enforcement around the world. So we'll take a brief look at something that was in my inbox yesterday from a blog called the Council on Foreign Relations blog. Anybody else here get the CFR blog on cybersecurity? So a few hands, great, it's a great blog. And this was shown yesterday morning on the CFR blog, a LinkedIn profile, which looks pretty ordinary. Sean Brown, he's a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, and he's got 24 connections or so, which isn't a lot. So the Council on Foreign Relations blog of yesterday morning said, he's not real. And because we do a counterterrorism cyber blog and happen to notice this, we're going to write about it. So this is a really sort of curious example of self-regulation, if you will, or outing how ineffective or impotent the Council on Foreign Relations itself is in monitoring its LinkedIn members. You're smiling, maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. So, and there's an analysis in the blog, you can take a look at it, an analysis of why the CFR folks don't think, they know he doesn't work there, but here's the analysis. The cyber analysts provide the forensics on why it's really not a real profile. What's the problem here? So we've seen a lot of examples of, in the past hour or so, of terrorism, terrorist activity in cyberspace, and foreshadowing Ram a little bit, separating terrorist use of the internet from actual leverage of cyberspace to commit terrorist acts. Here's another example, and I'd like us to step back for a second and say, okay, well, beyond the fact of this very strange situation, which was outed by the organization itself, how do we look at a situation like this in terms of its regulation? What laws are relevant? Has any law been broken, really? And the answer is probably not. So we're going to launch into a description of a project which we've just finished up here at the ICT. Uri is a co-conspirator, and there are few other co-conspirators in the room, so thanks to all present who've taken a part in this. And Stevie Weinberg found the fortuitous name ICTRP, getting the ICT piece in there beautifully. But its real title is the International Cyber Terrorism Regulation Project, co-sponsored by RUSI out of England, out of the UK, and the Global Internet Forum to Counter-Terrorism, which is made up of the four biggies that you can see on the left and a few other partners, with a sort of double-barreled attempt to look at how regulators around the world are encountering counter-terrorist, are undertaking counter-terrorism. Can everybody hear okay in the back? Okay, great. So here are the goals. I'm going to put them up real quickly. The ultimate aim was to say how, through regulation and through a legal perspective, do we encourage cooperation for enforcement? How do we do this job better of identifying terrorist use of the internet? And we'll see in a second that circle that Uri showed you earlier, the financing, the recruitment, the propaganda, the messaging in real time to terrorists who are undertaking terrorist operations. How do we address that through regulation and law? And in the end, look at actual cyber terrorism and through the use of cyberspace. I'm sorry, so that's the circle. Again, all of this is on our website. You can see it a lot more clearly. The infographic is a little bit fuzzy, but you can see sort of how the circle goes from the legal light issue of propaganda, which bumps up really quickly against freedom of information issues and freedom of expression issues, we all are familiar with those, and moves through the financing piece and the operative piece and the post facto terrorist event publication or leverage of all the advantages that we've heard of already of using cyber media to get the terrorist narrative out. And each of these pieces was subject on our website to a drill down on two separate vectors. So bear with me for a second just to see what our structure was. Our research methodology took all of those states, international organizations, and private companies that you can see at the top. So 6 countries, France, Germany, Israel, UK, US, EU. International organizations in the middle, Europol, NATO, Interpol, and the OSCE, and the UN. And then on the very right, our recognition that those 5 companies are really regulators, which isn't a given. Usually we think about regulators in terms of governments, maybe international organizations. Our decision in terms of our methodology was to say, we're going to look at the terms and conditions of use on these private companies because they really regulate millions and millions of people in terms of their activities in cyberspace. So we included all of these. And you can take, this is sort of a drill down of the things that we looked at. This is really the core of the research here, and we owe lots of gratitude to many, many hardworking interns here at the ICT. We're not going to show you the whole Excel, but at the backing of our research was to look at, for example, France, Germany, go down the rest of that whole list, to look at definitions in the laws of what propaganda is, to what degree is it prosecutable, what are the punishments involved, to look at what incitement is under each of these countries. Incitement is if you look up the Facebook terms of use, there's a definition of incitement and what Facebook intends to do about it. So the intent here was to really do a deep drill down, probably to the best of our understanding, never done before. That's the feedbacks that we've gotten, Gesundheitsraum, to really take a broad sweep look at how different legal systems and private companies look at these specific legal issues, with the end goal, obviously, of here are some examples you could take a look at. The drill down was through all of these 3. To getting to our findings and recommendations, before we get to those, to say at the end of the day, once we have this kind of broad sweep understanding of how countries, organizations, and companies define incitement, we can much more easily identify where cooperation can take place. Where are those definitions that you talked about? Where are those definitions overlapping, allowing countries to cooperate on prosecuting terrorist crimes? And where does work need to be done on closing those gaps? So again, this is a lawyer's game, I get it. Our tools are our definitions and words. But again, coming back to that point of how important it is to make sure that we have a solid understanding of how this enforcement structure is built so that we can begin to make progress on not only identifying terrorist activity, but punishing it. Findings and recommendations, just a really quick sweep. You can see our policy paper. We looked again where there's high areas where there's a high area for potential of cooperation. For example, identical definitions of terrorist activity in cyberspace make it much easier to exchange forensics. No question that multi-stakeholder engagement, which is very much a buzzword, is key to success in the legal piece as well. And that doesn't mean having lawyers talk to lawyers, the opposite, going to your points on the points that we've heard on how important it is to bring policymakers in, but also to bring the tech people in. Policymakers, lawyers don't understand the technical aspects of how you get to these definitions, we all need to talk a lot more frequently and much more in depth, and to understand one another much better. And this kind of forum is one way to start doing that. Other findings and recommendations, sweeping through really quickly, thinking about how we quickly relay information, not only about the definitions in our legal our legal canons, but our more informal policy definitions. What's best practice for enforcing counter-terrorist measures? Is it a constant stakeout and surveillance? How does the surveillance and the privacy piece, which has been already mentioned here, how do they bump up against one another, and what's the best way to solve that clash? Using the technological tools that we've heard about already today, and then the end of the game, and I know Ram's gonna talk about this, when the moment comes, which we haven't seen yet, where cyber attacks are perpetrated through cyberspace by terrorists, in every sense of the word, a financial sector is taken out. I don't want to steal your examples, Ram, but other examples that you hear about in a moment are taken out. Do we have the legal tools in place to address that most serious of crimes? I'm sorry, we're doing possible next steps. So we're looking about, the project concluded with the obvious conclusion of any funded research project is that there's still open issues and we need to do more. So we're really hoping that there will be a next phase of this project, and we'd be very interested in hearing from people in the audience about some directions that might be fruitful in terms of your own work. So please let us hear from you either through your questions or comments offline. And we want to take it to a much broader scope of not only the actors that we've shared with you today, but to make a much broader database of what laws look like, what regulation looks like, and to follow them as they change through time. I'm sorry about that, going backwards already. We're happy to have questions as long as we have time. Uri, I want to follow our discipline, but again, just coming back to the initial hope that the importance of having the legal building blocks in place and the regulatory building blocks in place so that law enforcement folks can do their job, and that multi-sector, multinational, multi-organizational cooperation piece around enforcement can take place much more easily than it does now. Thanks. Any comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a two-parter. Thank you.
And there's a question mark at the end of each part?
Yes, there is. Question number one is, what do you see as the outcome of a common forensic architecture for where you are right now, sort of as a placeholder for where you are today in reaching a common forensic architecture? The second thing is, how do you foresee the advent of quantum disturbing that? Two questions.
So, Ori, how many hours do we have? This one demands that the microphone be taken off. The first question is a great one. It's about how we do the forensics, or really sort of the data analytics, if you will, of terrorist activity through cyberspace. So how do we drill down to technical analyses? That's what I'm assuming you mean. So interestingly, I'm putting on my international law hat. There's 200 years of legal cooperation around how we do evidence forensics in the physical world. That's very much a part of the current regulatory approach to how we do it also in the cyber world. So there are certain standards for forensics, and I hope let me know if I'm not hitting your nail on the head. So there are standards for forensics in the digital world. And the technical, this is exactly one of the points where the technical folks have to teach us lawyers what's doable and what's not doable. But it's much more to go to sort of the regulatory, and the next step in the regulation of this piece is to really evolve an internationally accepted standard for how we do those forensics.
And I was also going at what I call exploitable vulnerabilities in the forensic standard.
Sure. Okay, if we could, great question. If we could leave it for the discussion at the end, that would be wonderful. As well, the whole issue of how an international lawyer is going to capably talk about quantum mechanics and quantum physics I do a lot of reading on the issue. I ask a lot of much younger people what they think about this, but I'm going to answer you with a headline that I got, again, with the reading that I do is almost on a daily basis of how to make sense of quantum mechanics, and the headline was, even quantum physicists don't understand quantum physics. So maybe you understand it better than I do. The whole issue of how quantum thinking affects activity in cyberspace is a great one. I'd ask your, as a favor, if we could leave it to the broader discussion. Not a way to completely avoid it. I don't think I'll have a final answer, but if we can talk about it later and get some more input, that would be great. Is that okay? All right. Anybody else, a quick one? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. This is just a quick comment. I was actually one of the people that in Portugal in the last government had some responsibility towards the new counter-terrorism and terrorism laws. And for many of the things that we did, and many of the good things that we did in the new law that's still now active in Portugal, one of the things that we are actually sorry for, it's not the political aspect itself, but it's actually the lack of respect that judges and prosecutors show towards terrorism and counterterrorism policies. And for as much as we can legislate, for as much as we can put out in a law, and for as much as the intelligence community, law enforcement agencies can do, in my country at least, we cannot do much if our judges and our prosecutors keep on living of the 19th century. And probably in the future, that is something those people should be addressed probably by their responsibility or their responsibility in the future. And just as a last example, in my country, the only terrorist problem that we are now having publicly, and it is on trial, is actually regarding soccer fans that allegedly took hostage a soccer team, and they are being trialed as terrorists. And us, experts in terrorism and counterterrorism, we actually think that's a total violation of every victim's memories in the world that have suffered from terrorism. But that's something that we need to deal in the future, judges and prosecutors.
So that's a great example of a mix-up, given the basis of facts that you shared with us. And I can't agree more. It's really, it's a learning curve that we're all on. And obviously to have judges on a high point of the learning curve is really, really important. I think it's part of what we're doing here in the session, right? So if we all are familiar with the expression that cybersecurity is a team sport, and counterterrorism is a team sport. So one takeaway here is that not only is it a team sport, but it's a multi-team sport. So within the community of legal activity, sure, judges and advocates need to have a special learning curve, and they need to talk to technologists, and they need to talk to policymakers and vice versa. So it's really a multi-stakeholder game. You're really highlighting the stakeholders that are part of the end game about how we really make effective regulations and law enforcement stick at the end of the day. So I can only agree with you. Thank you all.